is here, who I think is going to be. Do you know whether? We'll introduce each other in a minute or two. Yeah. So I don't know whether Delinda is coming or not. Do you have any idea?
She's out of town.
Oh, so then Delinda is not. So this is probably who we are. So this is excellent. And I want to welcome everyone to, this is the second of our sessions on the Zohar. We had an introductory ramp-up session last time where we covered everything you need to know about the Zohar. Just kidding. And I know that. Can
we have a quick refresher? Because I have no idea what the Zohar is.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, briefly, we will do that. And I did, before I forgot, it's a little bit of housekeeping. That is that our next session was originally scheduled for, I believe, December 15th. But some of you may know that that the night before that is, yes, is that correct? Yeah, it is when there's going to be an engagement party for my daughter, and so family is still going to be in, and so that is just really not a good time for me to do it. And
come on, it'd be great.
Oh no, I'll have a hangover.
The perfect time for it, yeah. So, from my perspective, I mean, unfortunately, the next time that makes sense, I mean, is either really early on December 8th, and I have no idea whether there's chanting or circle or anything.
No, chanting is the 22nd.
Right, right. So the 22nd, and the 29th is quite late. Though that should work for me. So, I don't know whether, I'll just get a little reading right now. I might have to do it via a doodle poll for the regular participants. But, is December 8th to a conceivable for people?
Yeah, well,
yes,
because I'm working December 8th.
You can't do it the 8th.
I can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
Do it, you have no car.
Okay.
You're coming with me.
So what is that? You can't do it?
I can't do it the 8th.
Okay. And what about you?
I can.
You can. I mean, the alternative is to do it one evening, and they're all equally bad probably for people. In other words, there's probably no such thing as a good time.
So what about the 29th, even though it's late?
What about the 29th? That does work for me.
Is that
It's a Sunday.
Oh, it's the last Sunday in
Oh, it is the last day of Hanukkah.
Yeah, it's the last day of Hanukkah.
I can do that.
Okay.
I can do that. You probably won't be here.
You can always Skype in Zoom in if that's so. It looks like the 29th is a better bet than the 8th. So I'm going to note that right now, and I don't know whether Jane is. Do you know whether Jane is coming? Because she's the one who's going to be in charge of the calendar, I believe. So
we'll have to let her know.
We have to update that.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe.
Okay, I'll remind her. Let me
Yeah.
just write a note, because otherwise
Okay.
I won't remember.
Yeah. Okay. So that could be. That's potential. I wanted to take care of that because I am so likely to forget it. So let's do a check-in first, and so where we can just say who we are, and maybe one association that we have with the Zohar, and do it in one sentence. Okay, without a lot of ands.
Oh, no.
Okay, so I will start, and we'll go around, and then I will turn the screen around so people can see. We'll do the Zoomers in last, but not the least. Okay, so I'm Elliot, and welcome to the the home that is devoid of the Linda who is most often here in this home. And the Zohar, I would say a creative masterpiece of flowing erotic social mysticism.
Oh.
Okay, and I'm going to go around next to Gabrielle.
Hi, Gabrielle. I'm Gabrielle, and the Zohar without ands.
Not too many ands.
I'm very connected to the very name of it, of it, of the brilliance that is embedded in the name. I'm very excited about this idea of mystical companionship. That's really what excites me.
So beautiful. And moving around, we'll get Roanne later. So one of our Lindas.
Yes, one of the Lindas. Well, I'm connected to the Zohar in that many, many years ago, probably over 40 years ago, I spent a day or so in Sfat, which was very interesting. I didn't really know about the Zohar at that time. And I also possessed a 32-volume set, which I donated to Rabbi Bob Levy previously at
Beth Emeth.
No, not Beth Emeth, the other one.
Yeah,
Beth Emeth.
Yes, it's Beth Emeth.
Where I was moving. Regrettably, I only made a few underlines in the first chapter, and that it's not that it didn't interest me; it's that I couldn't move the books, and I've always been waiting for the opportunity to be able to explore it.
And Roanne, we'll come back to you. Sorry.
I'm Roanne Altman. I'm housed at Beth Israel Congregation. Grew up conservative and involved myself mostly with Musser, but come study with Reb Elliot when I can. And Zohar is of great interest to me, being the spiritual component of Judaism, bringing in light.
Beautiful. Pumpkin, do you want to say anything? Okay. All right. Well, we'll come back to Pumpkin later. And Amy?
Amy Rosenberg.
Are you able to see it? The Zoomers?
Yes.
Can I say, "Hey Zoomer"? That's a bad joke. Okay, go ahead.
I decided to come here today, and the Zohar is mystical. It's just, I've heard about it for ages, and I never read it or never. So I'm getting in this for the first time.
Thank you. And Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane. I am interested because I'm interested in all things Jewish and mystical. And I've never had an opportunity to study the Zohar before. And besides, it's a wonderful opportunity to come hang out with the kitties. Yes. And if you don't know that cats are very mystical, you have missed a key part of your education.
And
hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm Linda's son. Despite being really interested in mysticism and spirituality, and I actually know nothing about the Zohar, except I think there's a Zohar Gate. No, maybe not. And there's a really good action comedy called Don't Mess with the Zohan.
Yes. Good. And I'm going to turn it around right now just so I can get a little bit of a FaceTime with our Zoomers. And so I'm going to just go in the order that I see you, which is Chava, Suanne, and Linda Leah.
So, friends, thank you for allowing me to join this beloved community. My name is Chava Bailey. I live north of Traverse City. It is so cold here, and we got almost 3 feet of snow last week, so we're in. And my interest in the Zohar started when I had the privilege of Reb Elliot as my advisor for my master's degree at the University of Michigan. Many of the books that you see behind me are attempts to understand this text, and none of them helped. So I became interested after doing the reading for today in the question of comparative theology between the texts that we looked at, that we're going to look at today for the Zohar, and some sections of the Bhagavad Gita. Oh, and one other thing, I just caveat. I have a traumatic brain injury, so sometimes I'm slow to speak. And if I run out of juice on being able to handle screen time, I will quietly zoom away.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and we are delighted that that you are our North Star.
Thank you.
And now we move to our Southern Star, Sue Ann.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sue Ann Hochberg. I live in Toledo, Ohio. And I also love to study, and have had the great gift of Elliot as a teacher on and off over the last 20 some odd years.
Mostly off. Oh, sorry.
I'm fascinated by the internal structure, namely the sephirotic ideals and ideas that are really brought forth through the Kabbalistic and the Zoharic texts. And I have never really studied it academically. And when I read Arthur Green's first 2 parts of his book, it really was exciting to me, because it is very, very academic. And I love that. So and there was lots of the questions that he asked that, of course, I can't wait to see if
how
the answers.
How we hold together the one and the many. Okay.
Yeah, something simple.
And Linda Leah, who is
Hello from Sedona, Arizona.
Oh, I misspoke about our Southern Star.
It was 36 degrees here this morning, so, but it is incredibly sunny. My connection with the Zohar. First, I also want to say hello to our Ortza phone from Chava Bela. I haven't seen you in so many years. I feel it's a real blessing that I'm getting to see you today. And Jonathan, hi. Jonathan's been to my home a few times. I know he's been visiting in California. So about 9 or 10 years ago, Elliot, I had the privilege of sitting in on your Zohar graduate seminar. And Rabbi Daniel Matt came and read Aramaic that semester, and so and only one of his volumes had been published at that time.
It was about 15 years ago, but it's okay.
No, oh my goodness. Well,
yeah, because it was 2004 or 5. Yeah.
Well, okay, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Time races by when your life is filled with wonder. What can I say? So I feel like I received a lot, Kabbalistic receiving, and am anxious to receive more. I also was very taken with Art Green's research in the parts that I read, and I loved the term sacred fantasy that he used. But what I really love is the depth of the layers of the symbolism of the Sephirot in all the wonderful tales. And I especially love when the donkey is the Messiah. So there you go.
Linda Leah, this is Roanne.
Yes.
connect with you later because I'm coming to Sedona in 2 weeks.
Oh, well, I'll be gone by then, but I can tell you what fun I had if you.
Well, that
give you
would be
my-
great. So I'd love to chat. I'm about to make my reservations and do everything there. So
Email connection, is that the
email
best
is
one?
fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Call you later or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah,
Elliot will give you my contact info.
Oh, contact info, and then you
Okay,
can
thank
decide.
you.
Excellent. Okay, I'm gonna.
Rabbi, do you have a little notebook? I can take notes in? Something-
Undoubtedly,
Anybody- piece of paper?
we do have paper here. I can give you a couple sheets from this.
One coffee too.
I still have a little, I can have a sip of yours.
Oh, yeah. This is the first starter. So I'll give you more. Okay, so as is our way, let's chant. Now we'll chant our way in, make a bracha, and I think what I was hoping is that we could talk first about the art green, and then the maybe the last hour of our time we would look at today's text. And for those of you, I realize I made a copy of the text also in the Aramaic, and for our Zoomers, is there anyone who wants that? Okay, so let me send that to you now.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's to Chava, is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Chava, okay, Aramaic, and it might be and Hebrew texts. Okay, and I'll just say here. Okay, and let me see if I can get it quickly up. I may or may not be able to. I mean, I can definitely get it there. It's just a question of how quickly. Oh boy, not as quickly as I hope.
Not to worry, sweetie pie. I don't want to hang us up now.
Yeah, just it shouldn't be too hard. Let's see, Zuta. Let's see if that comes up here. That should help. Yeah, okay. Open. Okay, I just sent it to you. So the words we used them. We sang them last time, and I realized I don't know where the copies from last time are. Linda knows, but I don't. And so it's very simple. The words I'm going to write in the chat. Ana avda bekucha blichu. Okay, and blichu, and here we are. And that means I come to serve the Holy One a blessing. And it comes from a passage in the Zohar that we may know as Be'anarachetz. So this is just a very short phrase from it. And this is a Breslover niggin to it. Ana, Avda de Kurisha Berichu. 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 Manana, Avda de Kurisha Berichu. Anana, Avda de Kurisha Berichu. Ana. Avda de Kurisha Berichu. Ana. Avda de Kurisha Berichu. Ana. Avda de Kurisha Berichu. Avda de Kurisha Berichu. ana 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 Abda de Kodesh Aberi 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 Ana 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 Abda de Kodesh L'Hashem, Yichuku Tabrichu Shchinta, V'dechilu Urechimu, Erechimu Urechimu, V'shem Kol HaMitasvim Mitasvot Ka'an, Yaked Shem Yodei Bavav B'Yechud HaShalim. Hineni mukhan umzuman lekayim mitzvat hazeh shel Talmud Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav metzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And I also want to add that today is what we think is, or what we've celebrated as my father's birthday. My father, Zichrono Livracha, he would be 104 years young were he still with us. And yeah, so
Happy birthday, Dad.
yes, Dov Aryeh ben Akiva V'chaya, V'chayke. Okay. Oh yeah, sure. That it can be lowered. It can be turned off even.
Can we
Behind.
which way? I'll do
It's right behind. Okay, so the you're staring into the light. Yeah, well, it's great when it happens, but yeah, yeah.
It's also my mother's birthday today.
Oh, wonderful!
Yes.
And what was her name?
Gwen.
Gwen. Okay, so Bernard, Gwen. Yeah, that's great. And okay, that's good. So in our last session, we did a little bit of an overview of the Zohar, and let's get this off. And we looked at a couple of texts and suggested that the Zohar is the kind of the central work of the Kabbalistic tradition. That it took on in the early modern period a virtually canonical status. It was used, for example, in many locations to help determine halakha, which is certainly one of the ways of measuring canonical status. It was seen in many cases as a revealed text. With a kind of divine origin, and widely studied, venerated. The physical book of the Zohar in some communities took on a kind of healing quality, and the performative elements. First, the performative elements, a sense that that chanting the Zohar aloud was good for the soul. Right, that the sounds itself were healing. We know that in some communities, not in all, but in some communities, for example, in Eastern Europe, that there was a special shelf that was part of the Aron Kodesh of the Ark. It was called the Palitze, and the Zohar was placed there beneath the Torah scroll. and sometimes people would use it as a kind of kamea, as a kind of amulet that could be borrowed from the synagogue in a way that obviously the Torah scroll itself could not, and brought into the home of someone who needed healing, for example. So that's just, again, not in all communities, but in some communities. And that means both to some degree more physically accessible, but also considered to have healing qualities. Of course, in the status of the Zohar, I think I read this to you. Yes, I did. The status of the Zohar in the European setting, especially Central and Western Europe, of course, plummeted in the 18th and 19th centuries, and while it still retained a kind of centrality in Eastern Europe and throughout the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern realm, and there were, for example, in places in Central Asia, for example, and in Morocco, there were groups of men who would study Zohar together, and some chanting it, and there was a special chant for it. I think I played. I might have. I'm not sure whether I played a traditional chant for you of the Zohar, but I did play a kind of introduction to the study of the Zohar, that a chant that Yehuda Ovadia Fataya kind of generated, and he is an Israeli rabbi with Kabbalistic leanings, whose grandfather and great-grandfather were Kabbalists. His great-grandfather was the Talmid Mufak, the outstanding student of the great Baghdadi Kabbalist from the Ben Ish Chai, as he is known. Anyhow, from the 19th century, what else? We talked a little bit about the Zohar as a work of sacred fantasy. We said that the Zohar kind of rivals only the Rambam in providing a comprehensive and daring rereading of Judaism as a whole in the medieval period, right? And one of the things that's so amazing about the Zohar and the stream of Kabbalah that it is part of is that it reread the whole system of the mitzvot. It reread the Torah text in a Sephardic light, for example. Okay, and it wasn't just piecemeal, but it was an entire approach for deepening inner life, for participating in the life of the divine as it was understood. And yeah, so there's that. What else did I want to say? We talked a little bit about the Zohar as a pseudepigraphon. Remember that word? Pseudepigraph. I think I mentioned, maybe I didn't. It's hard to know what I dream and what I did. But okay, pseudepigraphon is a Greek word, right? You might have known that, Amy. Yeah. So yeah. So a work, epigraph, writing, epigraphy, right? A work that is attributed to other authors, usually more ancient, and it is a venerated tradition in almost in so many religious traditions. So many of the works that are attributed to a particular master or writer are actually written afterwards and attributed. And in this case here, most scholars will say that the Zohar was primarily compiled in the 1270s through the 1290s in Castile by a group of Kabbalists. And Gershom Scholem, the great scholar of Kabbalah from 1897 to 1984, he came to the conclusion after just meticulous philological study and comparative study that the Zohar not only was a work from the medieval period in Castilian, but probably could be attributed to a Kabbalist, Moshe de Leon, right? And he did this by comparing Moshe de Leon's Hebrew signed works with the Zohar. And there are passages in the Zohar which are very similar in content and even in locution to the Hebrew works of Moshe de Leon, but without some of the ecstatic language of the Zohar, which of course was written in a certain kind of Aramaic. But in recent, there are all kinds of reasons why we think that that the Zohar is not primarily a 2nd century work, in part because some of the phrases are translations from Castilian, idioms are translations from Castilian, because some of the concepts that are in the Zohar are based on much later, that post late antique sources, because well, I can go on and on, because there are very interesting misunderstandings of even of the Talmudic text. And what we're going to see today, Rabbi Pinchas, who is in the Gemara, is the son-in-law of Shimon Bar Yochai, the hero of the Zohar, is here the father-in-law. Okay, I mean, and of course there are reflections on realia that are much later inventions. For example, the water clock. Okay, that's in the passage we'll read in the Zohar. It's like an alarm clock that would drip, drip, drip. Okay, and would wake you up in the middle of the night. And there's no real attempt to hide it, right? There's no attempt to hide it. And so why? What's the function of this pseudepigraphic mask? And we said that there's so many reasons for it. Remember, one, the skeptics, or not the skeptics, but like the hard-headed among us, or which might be a part of every one of us, is noting that an ancient work, especially something that comes from the 2nd century, would fetch a nice price, okay, and would have greater authority probably than a contemporary work. Okay, that's one thing. On another level, the authors of the Zohar, I'll say why I say authors in a minute, the authors of the Zohar may have felt that generation in the 2nd century of the Tanaim and Shimon Bar Yochai, who was one of the students of Rabbi Akiva, that they were spiritual creators and innovators, and they were models in some ways for the work that was at hand. You always look for spiritual ancestors. Many of us look for spiritual ancestors. In a traditional society, that's particularly important to find, to think you're not an orphan in history, right? And that there are others who are inspiring sources that still resonate. There's even a closer kind of connection potentially, and that is there's good reason to believe that some of the authors of the Zohar felt that they were transmigrations of the soul. That's a fancy way of saying reincarnations of the souls of that of that 2nd century, what we call Zoharic circle. Okay, so those are all reasons, and there's something else, and we can experience this through So you don't have to answer this. Any of you have different identities on the internet? Okay. Okay. What was it? Pierre. What is Romney's? Pierre. Whatever. Okay, but it was funny. Mitt Romney had one too, like you know, where he talked himself up. Yeah.
And he trolled the president.
What? Say it again.
He trolled the president.
Oh
with
yeah, he
dancing.
trolled the president with it too. Yeah, that's right. But we all know sometimes that we have the category of novel in our society, where you can imagine yourself in a different way. And sometimes, especially in postmodern novels, very often the protagonist, not very often, but quite not rarely, the authors of the work, that the hero, the protagonist of the novel might have the same name as the author, but is not identical with the author. Okay, yeah.
I use my Yiddish name.
Use your Yiddish name, right? Yeah, there are all sorts of, in Yiddish literature, having a nom de plume was de rigueur. How's that? was I mean, you know, it was very, very common. And if any of you read the Yiddish forwards online, okay, so I'm going to blow the cover of someone. So Misha Krutikov goes under the name of Misha Krutikov. He teaches at the university, and K and Kuf Michaeli. Okay, Michael and the Kuf from Krutikov. A famous Yiddish writer, Shmuel Niger. I can only say that in Yiddish. He took on that name, that last name, in the early 20th century, in solidarity with African Americans in the United States. I mean, that's just a wild example of this. But there are, Sholem Aleichem is a nom de plume. That's not his name. Mendele Mocher Svarim, Mendele the bookseller. That was not his name. His name is Rabinovich, and the name of, no, that was Sholem Aleichem. It was Rabinovich. I even get confused if I think about it. You know, it was very, very common. That's a little different because they're contemporary. But I just mean there is a sense that the mask of pseudepigraphy liberated the creativity of the writers. And yeah,
I can just confirm that I am Batman.
Okay, there's someone here who's claiming he's a transmigration of the soul. That's great. And we don't know whether he's David or Jonathan, but one of them.
Gotta keep you guessing.
Yeah, good. And yeah, and last story here, which is an aside. But I know there are at least one or two cat lovers in this chevra, and the cats at the Givat Ram campus of Hebrew University are very aggressive, and they will eat your lunch if you sit down on the grass. I can attest to that, and there's a whole story about them, that they are the transmigration of souls of professors who have passed on in ABDs. Right. And you can kind of guess
they're the ones eating your lunch.
They're the ones eating your lunch, yeah. And so those are that's the scuttlebutt at the Hebrew University campus. So anyhow, that was just to bring up a couple people to speed here a bit. And what I thought we could do, I wrote down a couple of the things that people mentioned here, that an interest in the Zohar, the work of sacred fantasy, the layered symbolism of the Zohar, the interest in the Sephardic structure of the Zohar, and we're going to talk about that, and elements of comparative theology between the Zohar and the Bhagavad Gita that Chava brought up, and anything else before?
So
that you want to put on the
well,
docket here?
I mean, I'm still wondering sort of what kind of document or text it is. It's not like straight scripture per se. Is it a guide to how to live life? Is it more spiritual than that? Is it insight into the spiritual nature of reality?
Well, yes, but you'll see, and I mean, it's structured. Remember that the Zohar was distributed piecemeal, right? It didn't become a book until 1558 to 1560, when many of the different manuscripts were, but not all, were collected and published in two rival editions in the northern Italian towns of Mantua and Cremona. And the Mantua edition published what we call Gufa Zohar, the main part of the Zohar, in 3 books. One for, and because the Zohar was also a midrash, that is, it was an expansion, a taking off, a jumping off, and an inquiry into the 5 books of Moses, right? It was organized roughly according to the order of the psukim of the verses, right? And so one volume in the Mantua edition, 3 volumes, 1 volume Genesis, 1 volume Exodus, 1 volume Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And it didn't contain the entirety of the manuscripts. And later, I think 1597 in Saloniki, and later in Istanbul, there was another collection of the Zohar called the Zohar Chadash, the new Zohar, even though some of the strata that are contained in that are actually among the earliest parts of the Zohar, according to scholars. And that doesn't include everything in the Zohar. There was another volume that was published called Tikkunei Zohar, elaborations on the Zohar, that was probably written by a younger disciple of the circle, and in the early 14th century. And so, you know, to get what we call the basic printed version of the Zohar, it's 5 volumes in that way. And that still doesn't include all the Zohar, because there's sections of the Zohar that were never printed. And there's some people say that there are parts of the Zohar that are much older, that they've been working on it for actually a much longer period of time. Okay, and a scholar named Ronit Meroz who says that. So
Elliot,
yeah,
under the comparative religion heading,
right.
I would also be very interested in diving into a little bit the parallels to Christianity, and particularly the rejection of the Immaculate Conception and its relationship with creating the Shekhinah.
Yeah, well, what we will do at some point is we will do we'll read an article on that's going to be talking about the Shekhinah and the Virgin Mary.
Okay.
So we'll get there. We can't do it all.
No. That was part of the first 2 parts, but I guess.
Absolutely so. And there are parallels, and there's real differences when it comes to sexuality and things like that. And yes, so it does have a whole context for that. And then, you know, because we're not doing this strictly academically, though there's an academic component, I'm inviting people to also riff on it spiritually as well, and see what's, what it awakens in us. Yeah, and the last thing I mentioned, the circle of the Zohar. Since the late 1980s, a lot of the scholars have shifted the question from who wrote the Zohar to how was the Zohar written, and that means, it's a really interesting notion, and many scholars feel that the Zohar is the fruit of a circle of Kabbalists, and that maybe Shimon Bar Yochai was the primary writer of this and writer-editor of this, but there were others, and Yehuda Liebes, a a leading scholar of the Zohar, even names names. Some of them you might have heard of: Joseph Jikatilia, Shalom Ashkenazi, Yosef ben Shalom Ashkenazi, I'm sorry, David ben Yehuda HaChassid, maybe even a guy named Bachya ben Asher, and you may or may not have heard of Yosef Angelet. They're all named in Art Green. And okay, so any of the Zohar is just like it dwarfs in its scope and just the range of issues that are dealt with. It's everything from journeys of the soul and how high the soul can reach to mystical meanings of different mitzvot, and it contains meditations on creation, on ethics, on different levels of cosmos and soul, connections to living creatures that are not human, that are more than human, and so on and so forth. Okay, that's, I think it's, and we'll just have to feel our way in, because as Linda Lay, I believe, said, that it's a very layered kind of tradition. I mean, the symbolism is layered. It speaks on multiple levels all at once. Okay, and so it takes a while to feel your way into it. Okay, so one of the things that Art Green does in the article is he talks about the history of Kabbalah prior to the Zohar, right? And he talks about the different strata of tradition that the Zohar builds on. The world of Jewish law, or of halakha, the realm of fantasy or lore, agadah, draws on the liturgy in the world of prayer, draws on what else? Remember? Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, and also on the Hechalot, and the Merkabah mysticism. That's right. All those things. So it grows in a particular kind of context and is the heir to all of those traditions. He talks about the way it is both a proto-novel or a romance and a midrash. But the Torah that's being riffed on is not just a book; it's a living presence. Okay, and that's the Torah is part biography of God, and provides a kind of map for navigating divine consciousness as it's understood. And the verses of Scripture are tripwires to waken you, right? It's to each wire is to open up a kind of world, and they always say one of the companions, that is the Zoharic circle, right? They always go Rabbi Shimon Patach, which means Rabbi Shimon began to speak, but also Rabbi Shimon opened up the verse. Okay, so there's a sense of opening it, and there's a sense of waking. That's one of the great themes of the Zohar, is to be awake, to awake from the kind of slumber in which we find ourselves, for us to awaken, and for us to waken the divine forces, to rouse and support the Shekhinah, who's seen as being often in exile, often separated from the rest of the divine world, separated from her beloved, the Holy One. So yeah, we get the sense of divinity being spoken of in terms of masculine and feminine energies. I already mentioned that usually the highest rung, that is Keter and Ein Sof, are usually understood as being beyond gendering, but they don't all. It doesn't always step out beyond that anyhow. And we'll see that even those sefirot that are understood as being masculine or feminine are not always just masculine or feminine. It's a little more fluid than that. This is all abstract, but till we see the actual sources. What else? So tell me about the Sefirot. What's up with the Sefirot? What are they? And what is the language of the Sefirot here? This guy. Sue-Ann, go ahead.
You want us to?
I would say my understanding, and most humbly, is the divine manifestations, the divine energy manifest in us.
Okay. So that's, yeah, absolutely. That's one level of this, is a kind of so let's hold on to that and get that there's a way in which the Sefirot are seen as the building blocks of the universe. It is some sort of unfolding of the divine energies in a grouping of 10, and that those energies are found in the world, and they are found in the most concentrated and complete way in the human being. Okay, and the order of the Zohar, so that mapping of the Sefirot are also mapped in us. Good. And what else?
I was struck by, and he used this phrase in a couple of different ways, that the Sefirot don't exist in time and space.
Right.
And this felt really important, because what that said to me was, there's a part of us that is atemporal and aspatial.
Yes.
And that I was really struck with the phrase that the Sefirot represent an inner divine reality and the dynamism of that, not a fixed, I guess as I was thinking about it my head injury sometimes makes it hard for me to talk like a human. The mapping of these energies, when you think about them as manifest in the human, it's never about, can we bring them all into perfect balance? It's, how do we have the wisdom to know when to bring which energies forward? So I was
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes. And I was going to say something to what you said, but then
you know what? I just have to say, you caught my brain injury, and this happens a lot. So just use it. Use it.
Oh no, that's very, very beautiful, about the inner life of the divine, the beyond time and space. That mean, insofar as they are mapped in us, they open up those realms, those possibilities to us, and that it represents a divine dynamism. That's incredibly important. This is a sense of divinity that dances. That divinity has all of these energies it's an unfolding of energy, or a manifestation of divine, call it personality, or divine realization, that moves from Ein Sof, that which is infinite, into these more specific kinds of qualities, right? And that they exist in dynamic interrelationship with each other, as a cluster, as a kind of ecosystem, as a personality, right? And we're not going to, we'll do a little movement where we chant the name of the Sefirot, but one of the things that's always a challenge, I'll get you in a second, Lindley, that's always a challenge is to learn the web of associations for each rung, because each rung is not just one thing, but a whole array of associations and possibilities. Green talks about it as a symbol cluster, or as an enriched nugget of speech, right? So, for example, let's see, for Shechina, let's see here. Shekhinah identifies with the suffering of, well, let's not, I will find a passage where I have this in order. Maybe I'll just have to riff it because I'm not seeing it here. So I'll just riff it. That some of the images associated with the Shekhinah are the community of Israel, the well, the sea, the bride, the queen, King David, the totality, the moon, Rachel, Leah, the color black, the color purple, the color deep blue, the rose, the spring, and that's just for starters. The temple, the Sabbath, right? It's in all of these different worlds and rungs, and you have to feel your way into it. Okay, the web of associations, that they come from Midrash, they come from very specific places, and they come from the imagination, and so that's part of learning that, and it is dynamic. It's in relationship to lower worlds, to us. It's in relationship to other sefirot. That so there's a coupling and uncoupling, a dance that's going on in the divine world. It is not static. Divinity is in dynamic movement, sometimes in flow, sometimes in fissure. Sometimes there's breaks within the divine world as well. Shekhinah is also known as that which is full, but sometimes she is known as she who is impoverished, she who is without wealth, right? And that's another interesting thing. Shekhinah is also that aspect of divinity where divinity says I to God's self. It's the divine I, Ani, right? And there's a movement as the Sefirot unfold from Keter, it's Ayin in Hebrew, the no thing, all the way down through all the realms, the divine realms there, to Ani, I. So from no thing to I. And part of what happens, the Sefirot represent stages of the divine unfolding. They represent, and they're also, if you reverse the course, they're stages of the mystic's ascent through different levels of consciousness back to the no thing. Okay? They're sometimes arranged as a hierarchy, but you can also understand them as a circle. Okay, now Linda Leah. Yeah.
So returning to all the Sephirot, one of the things that I love to think about and work with and learn more about is not only is it about the different manifestations of the divine energy within us and how we use them, but our responsibility theurgically to carry out that dynamism, work with them within ourselves for our own unification and reascent to Ein Sof, but also to enliven those qualities within the Godhead.
Yes.
That was so fresh an idea the first time I encountered Zohar.
Yes. That we have a cosmic responsibility to rebuild the Godhead, right? It's to restore divinity, right? Even if divinity is the source, we are part of it, and we also have an obligation to rebuild those energies, to restore the energies that themselves can be frayed and exhausted by human activity in the world, and missing the mark, etc. So we're building this is a little bit more in Luriana Kabbalah, but we're rebuilding the Binyan Malkut. We're building up the Shekhinah. We're building up the divine interface. That's another way of looking at the Shekhinah, or the God, or the God field of the Sefirot. That it is that interface between the divine infinite and our realm, right? And we interact with that. We inter-are with it. And yeah. And go ahead, and then we'll get off all this abstraction in a minute, but go ahead.
There was one sentence that I found really fascinating. And
Oh, here's
what Art Green said: that there's a daily coronation taking place.
Yes.
And
right.
you know, because I think of those coronations on, you know, Rosh Hashanah or Shavuot, but the way
it's in every kedusha.
Yeah. I found that very exciting.
Yeah, it's like it's the cosmic events are not ones that happen at one time only. They're constantly unfolding. Okay, the work of creation is constantly unfolding. The Exodus from Egypt is constantly unfolding on some kind of spiritual level. Here's like a symbol cluster. It's on page 57 of Green. And he said, the Zoharic narrative, anytime certain words appear in the text, be it in the Torah, the prayer book, or Talmudic Agadah, all the other terms are evoked as well. The same is true, especially in the Zoharic narrative of seeing or experiencing any of the natural phenomena that are part of this symbol cluster. Okay, and now this is a Bina. He's talking about Bina, the source of language, the quarry out of which the lower sphere and the letters of speech are hewn, the upper Eden out of which the spherotic rivers flow, the spring from which the waters of life are drawn, all those things. It says, to come upon a spring, which is what we're going to see, is also to think of tshuva, that is of return to the source, of the quarry, of the mysterious 50. Why it says there are 50 gates of Binah, okay? And that why, where does that come from? It comes from a midrash that says there are 50, not gates, but measures of wisdom. But sha'arei also means gates. So they're imagining it as gates of channels of energy that flow out of Binah. The sort. To encounter the word quarry in a text would immediately bring about mental pictures of the mother, okay, because Shekhinah is the divine mother. The Jubilee, what happens in the Jubilee, all property returns to the source. So it's everything going back to the source. The spring, that is the wellspring that nourishes the rivers, all the rest. What then is the third sphira, we might ask? The Bina. The Kabbalists did think of it as a hypostasis, that is, some sort of divine or quasi-divine entity that is a reality within the Godhead that you can't substantialize, or as a distinct journey from the utter hidden oneness towards self-revelation. From a functional standpoint, Bina is also a cluster of symbols, a nugget of enriched speech by which the Kabbalists can seek to express something of this deeper than accessible reality. So they're using these rungs and these associations to make more elastic our consciousness, to make more elastic our way, to stretch and distress ordinary speech, to go beyond the discursive speech that is analytical, that divides everything into subject and object, okay? And it's creating a kind of symbolic, loosened kind of consciousness. At the same time. So that's like real, and inviting everyone to participate in it, usually in an ecstatic, often in an ecstatic way, but in a way that brings about wonder and improvisational possibilities. Okay, that's what I would say. It's like, it's there, it inspires and opens you. Go ahead.
Would you say that like one of the things that I think about in the Bina is like it's like a triangular relationship?
Yes.
and there are all of these triangular bits where you
Yes,
have
if
like
you look at the hand,
two.
does everyone have the handout from today? It's on, it might be on, if, could you get it, Linda? And just distribute them, and you'll see that I may not be on the one that I sent out to you guys, but in the one that I made for today, let's see, do I need one? I might need one myself. Yep, that's it. Okay, but it's for, there should be one for everyone.
Lower that light. It's
But maybe
reflecting.
turn it off.
Just
I
turn
know
it
that
off.
we
We don't
need
need
Turn
it.
it
We
off
don't
because
need
it's
it. Okay.
hitting
This is well,
that
Yeah, it's
picture.
on the
and it's
back.
hitting my eyes.
Okay, so everyone should have one. But
On-
if
on
you
the
look
back.
here, it's I distributed this last time, so you should have it, and it's in our Green's book. Okay, at the beginning of our Green's book. Okay, so you can see the triangles there of the mapping of the Sefirot. The Sefirot as a whole can be seen as a grape cluster, as the shape of a person. Just yeah, it can be understood as a garden. You know, there's the Milky Way. I mean, they have a whole array of different understandings of of how you can grasp the Sefirot as a whole. Of course, the tree of life is maybe the most common. It's right. Go ahead.
Also, I guess the way I'm thinking about these triangular relationships is like when you think about the dynamism. The dynamism is how the two interact into the third, and the third becomes a thing that is moving and dynamic because it's like it's weaving together all of those opposite things, and so then you have like sort of like a created space or reality from that, and from that something else unfolds.
Absolutely, that's right. And so whether it's a mix of colors or scents or and there's connections that aren't even mapped out here, like one between Malchut or Shechina and Bina is a very common one, and it's a direct connection, right? And so I think sometimes I could imagine some kind of contact improv where different parts of like where people you stay in touch with a partner or a series of partners, and but you're constantly moving, and so different parts are being in touch, and they're and in the same way those of us we're in dveikut with the divine, but it's a divine dynamism, so we're moving, it's moving. There was an amazing passage that I could probably find right here, and then we'll shift to the text here. I wanted. Okay, let me see if I can find.
The Bina?
Understand. You're gonna have to do a little reading for the. It's just to understand it. It's the third rung, and we described it in many ways. Yeah, right. And so Vital, and I want Vital and Safrin. Okay, if I can find it. Okay, I'm just going to read you something here. Let's see if I can find it here. 28. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to just read you here. The Zohar provides not only a way of reading Torah, but it becomes, on the level of being, ontologically, Torah. The Baal Shem Tov held that the Zohar had a different meaning each day, while Chaim Vital from Tzfat in the 16th and early 17th century associated the ever-shifting meanings of the Zohar with the dynamic structure of the cosmos and the Godhead, the God field. For the Zohar was rooted in the protean, ever-dancing God. As the world turns, as divinity moves, so too the Zohar. These changes, this is Vital, are taking place at each and every moment, and in accordance with these changes are the aspects of the saying of the book, the Zohar, ever changing. So it's like, you know, divinity is shifting. The divine energies in the book, the Zohar, are constantly changing, and we as readers are constantly changing. And so it is this highly dynamic kind of source. In the same way that we are in an earth that is spinning, that is also revolving around a sun, which itself is part of a galaxy that is also in movement, and so on and so forth, right? And so it's a highly dynamic understanding of things, and of course there's points of stillness nonetheless. And the Ein Sof is really the point of stillness from which all of the dynamism moves. Okay. So,
can I just have one clarification? You said,
yeah, and then I want to move.
yes, you said before that the Shekhinah was whole, but it's also impoverished. So is the Shekhinah more not just positive thing? It's
Yes.
got both, and it's a bridge
That,
between both.
yes, that's right. It's because the Shekhinah is in this schema very often, though not always. The Shekhinah is dependent on the upper rungs for it to receive the flow. That being said, there are times when Shekhinah has initiative too, so you have to kind of watch it in some ways. But there is a way that Shekhinah can express and hold the totality, but there's times that she can become impoverished as well. And what's interesting is that she is an alter ego for the Jewish people here, and this really is based on the rabbinic understanding of the Shekhinah, right? The Shekhinah, who's the divine immanence and manifestation and presence that also goes with the people in exile. And insofar as she goes in people with in exile, is potentially separated out from the divine source. Okay, and this is worked out much more in Kabbalah than it is in rabbinic sources. Okay, so what I thought we could do is first just to take a moment to chant the name of the Sefirot, and then we'll move to our text for today. And so most of you know this this exercise here, but this is just a way of maybe moving a little bit out of the academic realm of being only in that, to opening up these centers within the divine and within us to connect with them. And this is just a chant of movement, and we'll do it 3 times, and with apologies for those of you who haven't experienced this before. I don't want to explain it too much. Okay, and we're going to start at Keter with the uppermost rung. We're going to map out the Sefirot on the body with just one word, 1 or 2 word associations with each one. I invite you to open those channels to receive, or maybe to unleash those qualities that are in us. So take a cleansing breath. And we're going to start with Keter. Feet on the ground, head suspended from above by a thin line of grace, of chesed. Keter, the crown. Keter, right brain, chokhmah. Chokhmah to left. Bina, right down, left out, opening up in love. Chesed, the arrow, Gevurah. Gevurah, open the fist, back toward to the heart, Tiferet, right leg, Netzach. Netzach, coming up in gratitude, Hod. Triangle down Yesod. Yesod, coming up with the totality, Malchut. Ma, Aleph. Feel the energy coursing through you. Again, feet on the ground, head suspended from above, supported. Deep cleansing breath. Beginning with there, the crown, just above the head, the light shining. Right brain, Chokhmah. Chokhmah, left brain, Binah. Binah. Right and left. And opening in Chesed. Chesed, the left, Gevuah. Gevuah. Back door to the heart, Tiferet. Tiferet. Right back. Perseverance, Netzach, coming up in gratitude and splendor, hold. Oh, triangle down, Yesod. Yes, oh, the totality. Ma. Last time. Cleansing breath. And if you don't know the names of the Sefirot, you can just echo me. Starting with Keter. Keter, right brain Chokhmah, Chokhmah, left brain Binah, Binah, right, left, opening in love. Chesed, direction, Gevuah, the heart. Tiferet, right leg, Netzach, perseverance, Netzach, gratitude, hold, triangle down the Yesod foundation. Yes, so coming up, so any brief sharing?
So I'm just curious, would the catalysts of the time of the Zohar themselves have this sort of embodied practice? Or is this something that we've developed in modern times?
It's developed in modern times, but I would say that, of course, it's an embodied practice because any sfira, any mitzvah that you do will activate some of the sfirot, and they're embodied. So that would come in. They're in post-Lurianic, post-Sfat practices, for example. There's a practice in the morning, putting on the talit and tefillin. And as you put on the tefillin sorosh, what you do is you align with Chokhmah, with Keter Chokhmah Bina, and the straps going down and down, down, down. You're drawing the energy down into the 7 lower sefirot. And so that you are correlating it. Whether they understood it as embodied as the way we do, I doubt. But there's some embodied element that's involved in that. That's what I would say. So yeah, there's a kind of a tuning that also is it is embodied even when they sometimes they'll correlate it, sometimes they won't, but it is nonetheless. Yeah. So
I like that.
Yeah.
Mapping with the development.
Yes. Yeah. There's a map, and when you put on the talit, what you're doing is wrapping the presence of the Shekhinah around you, right? And that has a tactile quality to it. right? And so whether they name it or don't name it, it is kind of, there is this, it both kind of metaphysicalizes the embodied in some ways, but or ennobles it, if you will. But it also takes something that would be abstract and makes it, you know, embodied and kinesthetic.
It's also something too in Sefer Yetzirah where they
Yes.
where they talk about
Yes.
certain body organs
Mm-hmm.
that are connected to
Mhm.
certain like qualities with the month or whatever, but that they make connections with body parts and spiritual
Mm-hmm.
symbols or ideas.
Absolutely. So, you know, and we'll see it when we look at something with the Kiddush, for example. No, I hope I had them marked up one that I want to look at. Okay. All right, I had it here. Let's see if okay. If not, I will simply look at it myself. Okay. So let's take out the handout for today. Oh, here it is.
Ellie, can you adjust your screen so we could see you?
Yeah, no worry.
Thank you. Just about to say the same thing. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Yeah, no worry. So what I want to do, I just chose, you know, one of the things that Art Green talks about is the way in which the Zohar is bathed in the eros of Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim. And that, of course, was our topic of study for the last 2 years prior to the Zohar this year. And so what I thought we could do is, even before we're running a little late, before we looked at the Zohar text, I want us to look at the passage from Song of Songs, okay, which you should have chapter 4, verses 8 following. And the reason I want this just to kind of be part of the backdrop, I'm going to give you the narrative backdrop in a minute, and then we're going to take a look at the sources itself. Does everyone have that? Okay. So let's see. Why don't we just start again with Gabrielle, and we'll just go around and everyone read a verse. We'll do the English. If you can think in the Hebrew, think of the Hebrew.
Okay. Oh, come with me, my bride. Come down with me from Lebanon. Look down from the peak of Amana. Look down from Senir and Hermon. From the mountains of the leopards, the lions dance.
You have ravished my heart, my sister, my bride. Ravish me with one glance of your eyes, one link of your necklace.
And oh, your sweet loving, my sister, my bride, the wine of your kisses, the spice of your fragrant oils.
Your lips are honey, honey and milk are under your tongue. Your clothes are the scent of your hair.
An enclosed garden is my sister, my bride, a hidden well, a sealed spring.
Your branches are an orchard of pomegranate trees heavy with fruit, flowering henna and spikenard and saffron, cane and cinnamon, with every tree of frankincense, myrrh, and aloes, all the rare spices.
You are a fountain in the garden, a well of living waters that stream from Lebanon.
Okay, oops, I used the wrong arrow. Awake, north wind, O south wind, come, breathe upon my garden, let its spices stream out. Let my lover come into his garden and taste its delicious fruit.
Okay, so in other words, the first part is the woman lover. I'm sorry, the male lover speaking to his beloved, and the verse 4:16 in italics is her response to him, and finally,
I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh and my spices. I have eaten from the honeycomb. I have drunk the milk and the wine.
And then together, this is the chorus. Feast, friends, and drink till you are drunk with love. Okay, so that's a little bit of the backdrop. Now, again, I don't know that the whole of this passage is necessarily in mind when we get to the riff here, but it does form part of the background. The whole of Song of Songs, in some ways, is present, and we're going to see that the verse that the Zohar is going to be riffing on is verse 4:15, I believe. Let me see.
Is that the one you marked as the key verse?
Yes,
Yeah,
the
that's
key verse.
15.
Yeah. You are a fountain in the garden, a well of living waters that stream from Lebanon. Mayan ganim be'er mayim chayim benozlim min Lebanon. Okay, and so I'm going to set this up in the Zohar a little bit, and basically, as part of the narrative of the Zohar, the Chevraya, that is the comrades, the mystical companions, Shimon Bar Yochai, and some of the companions, I don't know if they're all there, are meeting Rabbi Pinchas, and Rabbi Pinchas here is the father-in-law of Rabbi Shimon, and they're going to be going to, I think, to Rabbi Pinchas's home, visiting. He's going to be visiting his mother-in-law there, Shimon, and they come towards him. Rabbi Pinchas came. You don't have this, so I'm just giving you this here. You might have it. Those of you who have the Hebrew, because I included it there. And Rabbi Pinchas comes. He kisses his son-in-law, Rabbi Shimon, and he says, "I've kissed the mouth of Yud He Vav He, scented with the spices of the divine garden." What's that about? He's kissed his son-in-law, and he's saying, "I've kissed the mouth of Yud He Vav He." Because everyone in the mouth of Yud He Vav He is an image for the Shekhinah. Okay, so everyone here is an avatar of the Shekhinah. I want you to notice that, scented with the spices of the divine garden, right? And that the Shekhinah is hidden within each person here. And the mouth of the Shekhinah, the mouth of Yud He Vav He is an image for Shekhinah here. They delighted as one and sat down, and as soon as they sat, the birds providing shade flew away and scattered. And okay, what has happened before that? The birds had been walking and providing shade for Rabbi Pinchas, and this is typical of the Zohar. Is that the animal world participates in these adventures, and I would say the ones that tend to participate the most are birds. But occasionally you'll see donkeys seem to get into the act too. Okay, and cats only rarely, as far as I know, and get into it, but birds frequently do. And let me see here. I'll just go in here. Rabbi Pinchas said, tell the birds to go on their way. They have to go on to some other shlichut, some other deployment at this time. And Rabbi Shimon says, okay, the hero of the Zohar, along with the Shekhinah is also the hero of the Zohar. I know that the Blessed Holy One wishes to perform a miracle for us. Birds, go on your way. And the birds scattered and flew away. And, okay. And we have established as follows, all refers to, okay. So we can now go and look at our text here. Okay, so for those of you following, it is Rabbi Pinchas opened and said. In fact, let's just go back up. Internal page 37. Do you see that? Okay. So I can't remember where we left off in the reading. Was it? Yeah, okay, so go ahead. The
I'm reading
central,
number one. Reb
no,
Pinchas.
before that, the selection opens.
The selection opens in a pastoral setting. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, the central figure of the Zohar, his father-in-law Reb Pinchas, and the rest of the comrades have been wandering through the Galilean countryside, speaking the words of Torah. Deep in conversation, they come upon a shaded area alongside a gushing spring. This lush setting seems to be, quote, a gift of God, unquote, and they decide to tarry away. They sit beneath the tree, drink of the spring water, and are delighted. The natural beauty of the spot serves as a springboard to the imagination of Reb Pinchas, who recalls a verse from Song of Songs and begins to reflect on it.
Okay, and so actually right before this, there's, let me just read, let's see right here. Meanwhile, 3 trees were spreading their branches over them in 3 directions. A spring of water was gushing in front of them. All of the comrades rejoiced. Rabbi Pinchas and Rabbi Shimon rejoiced. Rabbi Pinchas says, it was so much trouble for those birds at first. We do not want to trouble living creatures, for Rachamav al kol ma'asav, from Ashrei, his compassion is upon all his works. Rabbi Shimon said, I didn't trouble them, but if the Blessed Holy One is kind to us, we can't reject God's gifts. What are God's gifts? The presence of the birds, okay? They sat down under that tree, drank from the water, and enjoyed themselves. And so now we come to number 1. Rabbi Pinchas opened and said.
I don't know where we are.
Okay. On page 37.
Okay, you need to go back and wait. Okay. Where it says 1. Yeah.
Okay, so Ann, you have it?
Yes.
And Linda Leah has it? Okay.
Rabbi Pinchas opened and said, a spring of gardens, a well of living water, rills from Lebanon.
Rills are just streams.
Okay.
Streams from Lebanon, yeah.
I don't know what cant is.
Canticles, that's the Song of Songs.
Okay. 4:15. A spring of gardens, is this the only kind of spring? There are so many good and precious springs in the world. But not all pleasures are the same. There is a spring gushing forth in the wilderness, in a parched place. It is a pleasure for one to rest there and drink. But a spring of gardens, how good and precious. Such a garden nourishes plants and fruit. One who draws near enjoys everything. He enjoys the water. He enjoys the plants. He enjoys the fruit. Such a spring is crowned with everything. So many roses and fragrant herbs all around. How much finer is this spring than all others, a well of living water.
Okay,
I have a question.
go ahead.
So when you say he enjoys the plants, he enjoys the fruit, what verb is used in Hebrew for enjoy?
It's from Nehanim, but let me, if you look, Gabrielle, that in the Hebrew text that
I don't think I have it.
I thought that there's one, maybe I didn't hand it to you. I made 2 copies. All right. Is it one of those over there?
No, I don't think it's. Oh, maybe it's in that packet.
No. It's not, I didn't make it because I didn't know who else
You can
would.
send it to me another time.
Yeah, sure, I can do it. So I can tell you. Let me read it in the Aramaic so you can hear it. Patach Rabbi Pinchas v'amar Mayan ganim be'er mayim chayim v'nozlim min Lebanon. Mayan ganim v'chilet mayan elahahu min ganim. V'hakama mayanim tavin v'karin it ba'alma. Ela leit kol hanaot shavin. Hanaot enjoyments. It mayan denafik b'madbera be'atar yevesha. Hana'a it leman diativ v'shate. Hana'a is enjoyment there. Aval mayan ganim kama ihutav vikara, hahu mayan aved tivu la'asavin ve'evin, man de kariv ale itane bechola. Itane takes enjoyment. Itane b'maya, ve'itane ba'asavin, itane be'evin, hahu mayan mitatra bechola, kama vradin, kama asavin derecha sacharena, kama yautahu mayan mishar ma'ayanim be'er ma'im chayim.
You know, you're reading that
Right,
in the original. It evokes such
right.
wow, wow, wow,
Yeah.
which are the exclamation points, which you don't get just because they're exclamation
Yeah,
points.
yeah, totally. So that's why I wanted
The
people to hear it. And
feeling.
anyone who can work in the this is Aramaic with a Hebrew translation, I can always send that to you. Okay. And I did bring one for you, and I
It's
didn't
okay.
realize you were coming. It's here somewhere in the pile. All right. So what do we notice in this spot here? He sits down, and all of a sudden he thinks of a verse. Okay, he's thinking from Song of Songs. He's thinking Song of Songs, right? And it just immediately makes this connection with the well of living waters and a garden of springs, or a spring of garden. It's a very awkward phrase in Hebrew. And what unfolds in that first paragraph there? What do you notice there? What is he feeling at this moment here?
It's a feeling of peace.
Peace.
Mhm.
Yes, and
calmness, refreshment.
refreshment. Excellent. And
Joy.
joy. Yes.
Appreciation.
Appreciation and gratitude, right? The sense of fullness, of balance, and that everything that one could want is there, right? When he says hahu mayan mitatra bechola, that it is crowned with everything, right? That's incredible here. And also notice the sensorium that's here, right? It's that you can drink in, that there's a sense of aromas that's here, the fragrance of herbs and even roses that are present there. Probably movement of the waters there, right? And probably the breeze that comes from that. Something of the cool of the shade that's in this place.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because it also has that kind of Talmudic rhythm to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he says, "Is this a spring? Is here? Is this the only kind of
Yeah,
spring?"
right.
Very,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
We're going to have a discourse about it.
Yeah. That's very good. That's very good. Yes. Yeah. Right. And it's expressing of wonder and surprise through that question.
But also like that the aliveness comes from a verse from Torah. So like to me, it's like
right.
It's like this way of the words coming to life, like through experience and connection to the everyday.
Right.
Which I find so exciting.
Right. That verse is being manifest. It's being enlivened or embodied, whatever the right word is, in this very place in nature, right? So that's incredible, and the ability to receive that, to open to that, is, and so before he starts really riffing on the verse, he's connecting his enjoyment in this place with the verse.
It's also multisensorial.
Yes, that's yes.
You know, it's not just that he's seeing the green, you know, he's also tasting and he's smelling, and it's enveloping him.
It's enveloping. He sees it, and yes, and it is enveloping. That's right. And I was saying, like, probably feeling the breeze from noticing the rush of the waters that's in that place, and how how special this is, right?
And it's like a mystic instruction too,
Right.
in a sense that this is how
Mm-hmm.
you have a mystic experience.
Right.
Is to be
To open in
and
this
to make
and-
those connections.
Yeah, and right. Yes, it's beautiful through the making of connection and opening up your channels to receive this. And in the Zohar, when there is this flow of divine presence, very often roses show up on the scene. That's just very, very typical. And again, if you want a little Castilian setting, I mean, there is a kind of a mysticism of roses. There's the presence of gardens, very much part, and especially in kind of the more aristocratic realms, which they probably weren't part of from what we know of the authors of the Zohar, but they're entering into this some of this could be a mixture of realia and sacred fantasy, but their mystical sensorium is certainly opening at this time, and it goes derecha saharena, which means that they are surrounding them all around. It's like a 360.
I thought of something else.
Yes, go for it.
It's a garden.
Yes,
It's a symbol for the matrix of creation.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
this can be a rich place from which wisdom, whatever.
That's right.
That's a creation will come forth from their spending time in this. But first, they have to appreciate it. They have to really immerse themselves.
Yeah, so that's it. They don't rush. And I want you to notice they don't rush too soon into the midrash,
right?
Until they've kind of immersed themselves. If I want to make a cross traditional pun, like with the Shekhinah, and we said Mary, they're marinating in. Okay.
So you mean marionating?
Yes. That's what I was getting. That's what I was getting at. Yes, that's what I was getting at. Yes. In this here, and I'm saying that they.
No, but also the rose is associated with Mary too.
And it's also associated with Christ. It's associated, a Rosicrucians. I mean, it is cross cultural. It is the sweat of Muhammad is the petals of the rose. You have this in Indian Hindu tradition. This is one of the things that's everywhere. And so the notion that the rose, probably Shoshana in the original context might have been a lily, but by the time you get to the Middle Ages, it's understood to be a rose, and so it is a very central symbol in the Zohar. Yeah, Sue-Ann, is that you or is that?
Isn't the rose actually one of the signs of an anachronism in the writing, that there weren't actual roses in the Holy Land?
Right.
But the other thing that always strikes me about the incredible lush sensuous, pretend geography of the Holy Land is that it may be one of the sources of appeal to a people greatly exiled to lands that don't have access to the Holy Land, that this imaginative Holy Land is like a heaven.
That's right.
Those who are exiled from the Holy Land.
There is something Edenic, and you're absolutely right that in the experience there seems to be a flow of Eretz Yisraeli kind of presence and sense, and which is also the scent of the Shekhinah here. Yeah, and that's absolutely right. That's really good. And so now let's go. I think we're up to Jane and number 2 here. And of course, the numbering here is me. It's not the Zohar. Yeah.
We have established that all this refers to the community of Israel. She is a spring of gardens. Who are the gardens? The Holy One has 5 gardens in which he delights, and 1 spring above that waters and drenches them. They are secret and hidden, and they all produce abundant fruit and verdure.
Just greenery. Yeah.
There is one garden below them. That garden is guarded round on every flank. Beneath this garden are other gardens bearing fruit of every kind. This garden turns into a spring watering them.
Okay. So now it's going back to the verse. And in the Aramaic, it goes, Vahachi okimna. That means that we've discussed this already, right? And in other sources or other places, it's been established. Of course, this notion of the garden as being the assembly of Israel, the community of Israel, is midrashic. And it's the whole notion of the Song of Songs referring to the community of Israel. What is tricky here in the Zohar with its multi-layered meaning is Knesset Yisrael is the ingathering or the gathering of the energies, and it's a name for the Shekhinah. Okay, insofar as Shekhinah is made manifest in the people Israel, right? And a Christian parallel might be the ecclesia, right? And the meaning of the mystical meaning of the ecclesia, which is sometimes associated with Mary in some of these sources. But okay, we don't have to go there unless we want to. Yeah. Shekhinah is the indwelling presence of the divine presence. Yes, yes. And yeah, exactly. And so
Sometimes seen as the feminine face of God.
yes, yeah. And so here it's not just talking about the gathering of the people Israel as much as it is the Shekhinah. And of course, that is that aspect of the divine that is most accessible to the people, right? To the gathering of the people. Okay. Ihi Mayan Ganim. She is, and I don't know how to translate this, a spring of gardens. I mean, if you look at an idiomatic translation of this.
What's the Aramaic?
Hebrew, Mayan Ganim.
Mayan
Ganim. It is a spring of gardens, which doesn't really make sense. It's a fountain in the garden, might be one of the ways it's idiomatically translated, but not in the Zohar. It's a little different. Seems to be that she's a spring that is surrounded by gardens, possibly, or a garden spring, something that is both with garden and spring in it, that she has both.
Does it have any connection to like the tree in the garden?
Well, all this there is a tree in this garden here, absolutely. And so it's Edenic, but it's also the garden in Song of Songs. Okay. So it's some sort of realized garden of the Shekhinah where all the sources that flow to the Shekhinah are present, and those that are below the Shekhinah or recipients of the flow are also brought into the same space.
Spring of Gardens does make sense.
Go ahead.
It's a spring. It's a source of water.
Right.
That waters garden. It brings forth gardens in which creativity can begin. It's like, and thou shalt be a well-watered garden.
Yes. Gone about that.
Living waters. So
yes,
this is a spring that causes gardens to bloom.
Right.
And here are matrices from which wisdom goes.
And we're going to read just a little further. For sure, it means that in that case. But with the Zohar, it's a little tricky because the Shekhinah here is kind of the recipient of the flow, and then in turn becomes a spring. Okay, so she ends up watering the springs that are below. The spring on high that waters Shekhinah is actually Chochmah Bina together. Okay, but we'll get there. That's one of the tricky things with the Zohar here, and then it goes Man Ganim. What is or who is these gardens? And then it is that the Holy One has 5 gardens. So. In which Dekam Mishta Ashea, in which he plays. I think I translate here takes delight, but Mishta Ashea can also mean plays, cavorts, as well as takes delight.
Is that
Okay.
like the story of God walking in the gardens? One of the stories of creation.
Yes, yes, it's true. But in the Zohar, it's more like the God ambling and taking delight and smell. You know, there's all these sorts of things. So the question is, who is Kutchabrichu here? Who's the Holy One? And on the one hand, it is Tiferet. Okay, and the 5 gardens are the 5 rungs that surround Tiferet. That is Chesed, Gvora, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. So if you want to look at the chart, you can see it. And that in the center of all of them is the Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is sometimes the trunk of the tree, if you want to go to that image there. But there's another way of reading this. And the other way of reading this, that Danny Matt points out, is to actually say that Kutchabrichu was actually really talking about Ein Sof. And that all of the gardens are, you know, you could see that just as lower as lower as some of the sporadic rungs in whatever configuration.
So not worlds, like it I mean,
Yeah,
is it worlds? I mean, because like,
well, if so, there's sporadic worlds.
there's sporadic.
Yeah,
worlds.
there's sporadic worlds because we're not. Yeah,
Okay.
and Mayana Chada Ilvaihu Deka Ashkelon Verave Alon, and there is one Mayan. There is a wellspring, a single wellspring above them, Alvaihu, Deka Ashke Mashke Lon Lahem Verave Lon Marve Lon, that waters them and saturates them. Okay, saturates them. Tamir veganiz, that is hidden, secreted away. V'chulam v'chulhu avdin perin ve'evin. They all make fruit and some kind of bounty. And this is somehow, you can understand this in some ways as the divine body, the body of God, as it were, as garden, right? And that's yielding this fruit. And so what is that Mayan on high? That Mayan on high is probably a Bina image, okay? And so there's a connection here. Are you in a place of Shechina, or are you in a place of Bina? It's kind of both. It's all kind of evoked in this place. And then it goes, Ginta chada iu letata, eat letata minai. Oh, wait, is that the next? No, did we read 3 yet? I can't even remember.
No,
let's read 3 now. It's oh no, that's no, we're not there yet. Okay, and there is a garden beneath it, and that's a Shechina. And so Shechina here is the garden that is.
Wait a minute, Shekinah is beneath it?
Beneath
like
this garden, yeah, there is. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go. There's one garden below them, beneath all the gardens and waters that come down. It's below these rungs, right? That are the 5 gardens. There's a garden. So here you can see the Holy One is 5 gardens, and the gardens that are watered by Shechina, by Bina above. And then there's a garden beneath them, below the Chesed, Gvora, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and that is guarded round and everything. That's Shechina, because Shechina is that liminal place between worlds, and so there's a sense of needing to be guarded because she is vulnerable in that way, because she is the flashpoint and the connection between external worlds and aversive forces and lower worlds and all that. And beneath this garden are other gardens. That's where the worlds come in, the lower worlds, and bearing fruit of every kind. And this garden that is the Shechina, that's the recipient, turns into a spring, watering them. She both receives and then turns into a garden. She's mekabelet umashpia. She receives and brings forth. So that sense, she is Mayan Ganim. She's both a Mayan, a wellspring, and a series of gardens, as well as being the source that waters all the gardens below. You can read that phrase in many different ways of Mayan Ganim. Okay, now let's go to 3. That's you, Jonathan.
a well of living water. When the need arises, she becomes a spring. When the need arises, she becomes a well. What is the difference? There is no comparison between water flowing by itself and water drawn from watering.
Okay,
Drawn for watering.
so now we've gone to the second phrase. We had first Mayan Ganim, and now we have Be'er Mayim Chayim, and a well of living water. And what the Zohar is doing here is really interesting, and it's a typical Zoharic move. Be'er Mayim Chayim in Hebrew means Be'er means both well and well of. Okay, in Hebrew, the construct form, that is a well of, if it is masculine, it's the same word in both cases. If it's feminine, you would usually you would put a taf at the end of it. Okay, so it would be she'elah, she'elat chayim. That's a ridiculous construct, but the masculine is the same. It doesn't change, which means you can read this phrase both as a well of living water or as a well, semicolon, living water. Do you get that? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, a well of living water, one phrase, or a well, living water, where it's two phrases. No, in Hebrew it can mean, you can read it that way. So it ends up, the Zohar ends up reading it as two different things. It's both a be'er and mayim chayim. It's both a well and an artesian spring or an artesian well that is bubbling over. And they're saying that this is reflecting on two different spiritual moments. Okay, the spiritual moments, sometimes she's a well, and sometimes she's a well that flows by herself and bubbles over. And what's the difference between them? Anyone? What's the spiritual moment?
I'm dying to know.
Yeah, but what is it? When the need arises, what's the difference between in spiritual life between a well that you dig and you dig and you dig till you get to the trickle of water and an artesian well that you just hold your hand out?
It's the difference between study and revelation.
Yes. Okay. So one where you work hard and you have to chew and chew and chew till you release the nutrients, as opposed to it just gets interjected into you, just breathe it in, right? One is a gift, one is grace, right? Or you're there and all you have to do is stretch out your hand and it's all there, right? And the other, there's dryness. There's dryness and you have to dig and dig and dig, and maybe with great effort, you will get a trickle of water. You know, sometimes you dig and it gushes. So, you know, yeah, go ahead.
But what's required is discernment so that you know where to dig.
Oh, well, yes. Okay, so you have to know where to dig the well. Absolutely. So that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, it's a whole other.
That's a whole other thing. And so you're saying the Shekhinah, okay, sometimes the Shekhinah is full and sometimes Shekhinah is almost empty.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference between the long path and the short path?
The long path and the short path, yeah.
And also Be'er and Barak.
Okay, yeah, there could be. It could be, yes. And well, I will say this, Be'er in Hebrew is, well, is also the root form for the word for explication from study, Be'or. And it's related to that. It's like when you dig into and you come across the meaning through a process of digging and excavating, right? So there is something in the etymology of what you're saying as well. Yes. And so, okay, and here you can go on to number 4, because I'm aware of the time. We're going to try to
from Lebanon. What rills?
Yeah, rill again means little stream. Okay.
5 sources issuing from Lebanon have become rills. For when they turn into a spring, water flows, trickles drop by drop, sweet water pursued by the soul.
Okay, so that's like an amazing passage here. So it goes on to say, rills from Lebanon, or little streams. 5 sources issuing from Lebanon become streams. For when they turn into a spring, water flows, trickles drop by drop. Now notice, sometimes you have an image of the spring being the origin, right? The fons vitae, or whatever they say, the source of life. But here, sometimes there's the source becomes there's like this source even kind of that trickles and then becomes a greater source somehow. Okay, so it turns into a spring and water flows, and then the rills come down, drop by drop. Okay.
So above we have one spring that
Right.
flows and becomes 5 gardens.
Right.
And here we have 5 water
sources that go in.
brooks. Yes, and they become one stream. Is
Right.
that a
Yes.
conscious parallel there?
Yeah, and maybe they flow through the gardens and come down to the soul. Okay, I'll give it away by saying the soul here is both Shekhinah and our own soul. Okay, because that is that name for Shekhinah of soul. I'll give you the Aramaic here. It is Mayan kad navin mayin v'nozin tipin mil'ela ilain batar ilain, drop after drop. Main mitikan, sweet water, de nafsha azla abatrahu, that the soul goes out after, that longs for it, seeks it out. And so it is that nafsha is both us as seekers and Rabbi Pinchas, who's giving the teaching and all of them. It's also the Shekhinah. It's also that the Shekhinah is longing for the waters of the Shefa to come through and to nurture, and that she can take and then give forth into the world. And so the critical term here is Lebanon, but there's a word play that goes on in here. So if you, this is where I would get my chalkboard out or my whiteboard. In Hebrew, just remember we divided Be'er Mayim Chaim into Be'er versus Mayim Chaim, the well versus the artesian spring, right? Same thing here. Lebanon, Lev Nun. Okay, in Hebrew, Lebanon, which if you imagine the map of the divine, it's up north. So if you're thinking vertically, you're thinking of that hidden source, which is if not Keter, it's Chochmah and Bina, Chochmah and Bina. And so the heart here is the Lev here is probably Chochmah, and Nun, which means the 50 is Bina. Why? Because there's an association, well known, they don't have to play with it in the way we have to explicate it, that there are 50 gates of wisdom, right? This is a well-known midrash. It goes, Chamishim Sha'arei Bina, the 50 measures of wisdom. It goes, there were 50 measures of wisdom, and Moses had 49 of them. Okay, so sha'ar in Hebrew means both measure and gate. So it instead of meaning 50 measures, 50 gates of wisdom. And there's an understanding that there are 5, and each of the 5 contain all 10 of the Sfirot. So there are 50. There's the 50 gates or 50 conduits that have the life flow, the heart flow. That come from the combination of Lev and Nun, from Chochmah and Bina together. Okay, it's a male, female, and androgyny. That then becomes the source, the pumping of the water, of the inspiration, of the life flow that comes down. So that's Lev Nun. It's all you can think of it almost as arteries, if you will, that are coming out from this heart. But this is it has sweet water that comes through it, right? The sweet water that trickles forth drop by drop, and here it's in a steady flow, but it's not like drinking from a fire hose here, right? You're getting it drop by drop. Each one is sweet. Each one nourishes the soul. Each one is a delight. I want you to notice that tipin. Right? Pursued by the soul, which is simultaneously Shekhinah and you, right? And so this thing. So you're in the garden, which is the garden of Shekhinah, which is the garden of also the garden of all the upper sefirot, and it is the place of connection between the upper worlds and the lower worlds, and they're all simultaneously present. And there you are in the Galilee, experiencing this. But there you are reading this in the Zohar in Castile, and also entering into this into this space. It opens up an aperture into this Holy Land space at the same time, as well as the upper worlds. They're all simultaneously present, and you're drinking it in.
I think I just got my take home.
Okay.
My take home is, I'm the garden and I'm in the garden.
Right. That's it. And remember
that's what I'm taking home.
That's exactly what Song of Songs is. Remember, she is the garden, and the two lovers are in a garden at the same time. It's mapping. It's that exact mapping in Song of Songs that's being replicated here. You're in the garden, and you are the garden, and divinity is the garden, and there is that confluence there of worlds and realizations.
I am.
Yeah. So let's read the last thing here, and we're going to wrap.
Where are we?
Number 5.
Now?
Number 5. Where are we? That's the right question.
38.
38. Number 5.
Now, does the song by Guns N' Roses called "The Garden"? Does that have anything to do with it?
It might. I don't know that song to know it. Yeah.
I'll take a look at the lyrics.
Yeah. Go for it.
It almost sounds like you're describing a fetus developing. I'm getting images of, the sanctity of life. You start out, where are we before we're a soul?
Oh, well, that's beautiful.
No.
Well, going with her idea of you are the garden and you're in the garden.
Right.
It sounds like the truth of the truth of the spiritual experience of you are God and you're the co-creator.
Right. And you're in the divine as well, which transcends you. Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Just read that last line.
Number 4?
5.
Five. So the Holy One has wrought a miracle for us right here with this spring. For this spring, I recite this verse.
So notice, it's reciting this verse for this physical spring that's in the world of nature, but also for the spring which is the divine world here, right? And the sense of miracle is that, what is the miracle here?
The birth of the garden, or the appreciation of the garden, or the birth? The manifestation.
The manifestation and the recognition.
You say that we get it. That's the miracle, that we get it.
That you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Like, whoa!
Because you could have passed it. You could have passed it. You could have just enjoyed it and moved on. You could have even jumped immediately to the pasuk, to the verse, and not even noticed the place where you were. You understand? And let's face it, that happens in Jewish tradition. That happens all the time, and maybe in life it happens all the time. You get a quick hit of it, and then you immediately trip into. That's the tripwire into whatever the lesson is, or the riffing, or and you lose sight of where you are.
To me, that's worrying about taking the selfie of the most
Yes.
magnificent architectural
Totally.
thing in the country, and am I in it?
That's right. Yeah, it's like
Point.
moving too quickly to the selfie.
And it's ironic because in Lebanon,
Right.
my 3 months of wandering around the Middle East, my camera broke.
Uh-huh.
And once I had to stop doing this because I couldn't,
Mm.
the whole nature of traveling through the Middle East for 3 months changed completely. Because
Wow.
then I wasn't taking pictures to show someone else. I was immersing myself in what it felt like, what it smelled like, what it tasted like. I mean, it just changed the whole tenor of the trip.
Wow.
I have no pictures of stuff. I hardly have any pictures.
Sue Ann has something to say, and we'll have to wrap. we got off a little slow out of the shoot today, but that's maybe we did a little too much review. But yeah, I knew that some of the people weren't here.
This thing
This may be, I'm sorry.
Go for it, Sue Ann.
Okay, no, I mean, this may be really off, but what if the fountain was, what if it's Ein Sof,
right,
in the most undifferentiated way, and in each garden is creation. So you're going from undifferentiated to differentiated in that circular way, and we can't be anything without all of it.
Without that flow, you mean? Or
Yeah, without the Ein Sof and the Ten Sefirot.
oh, sorry, I didn't want to. Okay, here.
In each garden.
Right. So that there's a totality present in each garden. Remember, Ein Sof is always there in the schema, underlying it, and so yeah, I mean you can discover it in all. So each individual garden opens up the layered garden. It's like a terrace of gardens, in that way. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I just wanted to play one other thing going out, and we'll hold hands as we. If we wish, as we do, just to take this in. And okay, let me try it again. Okay, and let's see if it'll let me have it. No, that's not it. Okay, why is it not letting me see the songs here? Okay. Oh my goodness.
I was going to say, I think a huge important part of what we're studying here is the final bit of I recite this verse.
That struck me too.
Say it again.
For this spring, I recite this verse. So it's
it's an offering of gratitude.
Exactly.
Yes, that's beautiful. Exactly. That's beautiful. That's incredibly important.
Why we're here is to praise the divine or help create the divine.
Right, and that just it completes the circle.
Exactly.
Right, that you are receiving the blessing, and you're bringing it back as an offering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No.
It seems like
that's
a
absolutely
very
right.
important part of the life cycle, and why we're here at all.
Yes. Beautiful. That's beautiful. Why is it doing this? Okay, if I can.
He's my son, Elliot.
I think he's talking to his computer.
No,
which is just being a computer, Elliot.
yeah. Okay, here it is. Okay, here. This riffs on this verse here, and we can just take this in. It's called Hine Zeba, but it starts out with the Be'er Mind train. It's Nabatila. So let's lift up. I don't have a cup here anymore, but I don't know what happened to it. No. So yeah, it's here somewhere. Let's do it, and I see where it is, and invite everyone to drink in, standing or sitting, just to drink in some of the sweet waters for the soul. May we open our channels to receive the wonder, to participate in that wonder, to drink it in, and then to lift up the blessing that we have received in gratitude, to bring it back to the source so that that energy keeps circulating, and to nourish life in its manifold and wondrous forms. In Omar. Amen. Selah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This was great. And so,
You.
so,
Toda.
so the next time I think it's going to be this. It's right around your birthday, Sue-Ann. It's December 29th. When's your birthday?
22nd.
22nd. Okay. I better. Okay. It's the 22nd,
It's my
and
birthday too.
and so we're going to be doing it, and we're going to be reading from a little bit from Malila on being on the way, and the companions, and so we'll get started with that, and let's see, probably I think we're going to do another. I think we'll do a text on the rose next time that's going to lead its way to the understanding of the custom of holding the Kiddush cup in one's palm like a rose. Okay, so it's an interesting text, and what's done with the text is even more interesting than the text.
Can you send that to us when you have it, if you send it to us as early as possible? That would be
Okay, you should have the Malila text.
Yes.
I sent you the book. So
Yes.
the text that itself that we're reading, I'll try to get it out sooner than later.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
everyone. And
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Samir.
Good cheer.
Okay, thank you.
Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to
Bye,
everybody.
Arrivederci. I have to give you